the side effects of being a Soho crime author is we force other Soho crime authors to hang out with you. And so here I am. My dream has been made a reality. Welcome, gents, tonight. Say hi to all of your fans.
Hello.
Hey, hi. How's it going, E?
So I want to start talking a little bit. I want to start with Tim, actually, because he's had a book come out during this quarantine period, which is unsettling, I think, at best. And not only is it a book, but it's actually the series finale to the Poke Rafferty series, which was the one I fell in love with in 2011, and that we've been publishing at Soho ever since. It's a book called Street Music. I haven't seen the physical book myself because of our situation. Tim, do you have a copy you can show us?
It just so happens. This is the best looking book that's ever had my name on it.
Oh,
it's gorgeous.
It is a pretty book. Well,
Yep.
Okay. Let me tell you that Street Music is a thriller. You know, we put thriller on the cover of all of Tim's books for some reason, but listen to what Kirkus said about it, okay? They said, quote, heart-rending, even fans accustomed to Hallinan's lurid, compassionate view of Bangkok may have to fight back tears, which is not the way people usually talk about thriller writers, but this is just true about everything Tim writes. It's got such a huge heart. And this is the end of a series where you've met and you've fallen in love with this family living in Bangkok, an American writer, his Thai wife, their adopted street child daughter, this book, like each of them, touches on a really important social issue. So this one follows one of the, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but there's a really important micro narrative in the book about a street woman on the streets of Bangkok and the path that brought her there. And it is just heartrending is the correct word. So Tim, I want to ask you, how does this feel? I mean, to have this cathartic career moment happen in a vacuum when you can't really publicize in a traditional way. And what are you doing about it?
Well, it's really two questions. How it feels to end the series is quite difficult, actually. I mean, this series came to me when I was in Bangkok and I was eating in a cafe and in the middle of the day, and I looked up and a really dirty little girl was looking at me through the glass, and she turned and ran away, maybe 8 years old. She came back a couple times and I finally had the waitress bring her in, and she was nervous, so I gave her my computer, which had pinball on it, and I went for a walk. When I came back, there was she was gone, there was an astronomical score on the pinball thing, and there were 2 stacks of gum because she'd been selling gum. And her name was Meow. And out of her came essentially the whole series in which an American travel writer goes to Thailand, falls in love with the country, falls in love with a specific woman, and they adopt this child. And one of the great unanswered questions of the book is about that little girl whose name is Meow. And I had no idea this was the last book in the series until I finished it. And I thought, whoops, I think we're out the door. But this answers that final question. I feel bereaved. I miss these people already. But I'm glad that they went out with such a gorgeous book. And as to how it feels to have it released, during whenever, what matters is it's written. You guys did a gorgeous job of putting it there. And we'll just see what happens, like we always do.
Well, you're being nice, Tim. But I will say, I only really have one regret about this series, despite the fact that I won't get to edit it anymore. That's the big regret. The second is that I only got to start working on it with The Fear Artist, which is book 5. Such an awesome book. But if you haven't discovered Poke Rafferty yet, you want to go back to Nail Through the Heart, book 1. It's just an embracing family story with such a strong driving narrative. But each of these books is a fantastic trip to Thailand. And of course, if you're just looking for one book at a time and you don't want the full series yet, may I recommend Junior Bender, our Hollywood smart talking burglar detective. But we'll get to that later. I'll stick with thrillers for a moment. And I wanted to ask you, Steve. So I found, as a lot of people have said similarly that it's a little harder to work and to concentrate during all this going on. And I confess I've actually only edited one book during quarantine, and it was the third August Snow novel. So
Yes.
we have, the first one is August Snow, which came out in 2017. Did I get that right?
Mhm.
And then of course we had another book that came out last year. Why am I blanking on the title? I apologize, Steve.
Lives laid away.
Lives Laid Away. Thank you. Lives Laid Away. And now we have a third book coming out next year. So I was caught up in the Detroit world of August Snow, who is such a superhero. I mean, he is really larger than life, ex-military, ex-cop. He's so strong. He's so confident in everything he does, and he just blazes into dangerous situations with no fear. And I spent weeks and weeks with him while I was working on the edit and going back and forth with you through it. And I confess that even after I finished the edit, I've really been channeling him and thinking about him a lot, because he's a traditional thriller character in the sense that he goes into these really dangerous situations with no fear, but he's also a guy who's out there fighting for especially the undocumented immigrant community. And it's something that has really been on my mind, is how people with fewer resources that I have right now are getting through this. And I wish that I had that fearlessness to go blazing into the danger of this awful situation to help people. And I'm wondering, are you channeling that same fantasy or about being August Snow?
I wish I had the courage of August Snow, but I think part of what I want readers to understand is his strength is not uncommon in Detroit. Detroit has been beaten, battered, and bruised for a long time. And it takes a very special person to take a hit to the face, go to the mat, get up, and say, what else you got? And I think August embodies that Detroit spirit. I think that's who he is. And I wish I were more like him. And maybe if I lose 35 pounds, it might be a beginning. Who knows?
I think August is more a state of the heart as opposed to, a
Yes.
corporeal presence. So I don't know. I'm channeling August right now myself. But I did want to ask, so here's the thing that really interests me. These two guys who I've got on camera right now, who I knew right from the beginning wanted to introduce to each other. They have some things in common. Neither of them was their first career writing. So Tim is an ex-Hollywood publicity guy, and Steve is an ex-Detroit ad guy. We've got publicity and advertising. And I was asking myself, in both of your books, we have some really larger than life characters. We have some really outrageous situations, social and criminal. And I was just wondering, were you inspired by your first careers to take up crime writing?
Tim, you want to go?
I took up crime writing partly to escape from my first career, which was very rewarding and in every single way. And it wasn't just a job. I mean, I was all over the world. I worked with everybody from Katharine Hepburn and Laurence Olivier on. It was fabulous. But I started writing when I was 9 years old, and I always knew that sooner or later I was going to clear everything off the desk and write a book. And I did that. And when I left that job behind, it was very difficult in a lot of ways. But this is the most boring answer in the world. Nothing is more rewarding than a good day's writing, And even a bad day's writing isn't so terrible.
Amen to that.
Something that wasn't there before is there, and
Right.
other jobs don't really give you that opportunity that much. So, I've used, in the junior books, I've used some of the Hollywood types that I came across in it. I mean, there's a perfectly dreadful producer in the junior books who is based on a very real producer whom I will not name, and some actors whom I also knew. But no, I mean, for me, as great a career as it was, writing was waiting, and it was what I had to do. And fortunately, I was able to do it.
Yeah, you've more than likely heard about writers that have emerged from Detroit advertising. And you can look them up, I won't bore you with that. But my experience, 30 years of advertising, marketing, communications in Detroit was very difficult. And it was difficult. It was, let's say, a long night of horror punctuated by seconds of bliss. I often found myself being the only one at an agency or a company. And by that, I mean the only Black person. And viewed more as a curiosity than a professional. Like Tim said, there's nothing more gratifying than putting 1,000 words on the page and feeling good about what you've done, telling yourself a story first. I will say this much. Advertising, marketing, communications helped me with the editing process, because in that business, you're always writing, rewriting, and rewriting the rewrite. So that muscle was built up, and I continue to build that muscle up.
So wait, neither of you is going to drop any names about really outrageous people who ended up in your book?
I can tell a story, but it's not about an outrageous person in my book.
What's it about?
It's about Laurence Olivier.
Oh yeah, you should tell the story.
So I hadn't met Olivier, and he was, after all, Laurence Olivier. I mean, there was only one of it. And he took my partner and me out to dinner, and he absolutely intentionally got me drunk. He poured my wine, he drank it himself, he was bottomless, he could drink forever. I woke up the next morning feeling like I was leaving a shining trail behind me like a snail. I was so hungover, I couldn't believe it. I got in this enormous Victorian bathtub and just lay there with just my nose above water, toddled onto the set about 2.5 hours later, and all the way across this dark soundstage, this one lighted corner where he's working and the lights are on, and he looks up from what he's doing and he goes, "How you feeling, Boise?" And he had done it to me on purpose, It was sort of his way of saying, I'm in charge. But he was a fabulous guy, and I worked on him in a movie with Katharine Hepburn, who was quite simply the greatest human being I ever met in my life. I could tell story after story about Katharine Hepburn, but it has nothing to do about writing books. But this was an astonishing person. It was a great job. It wasn't as good as writing, that's all.
Those are classic stories.
Well, I think the one story about August Snow, getting a call from a Hollywood producer. Do you know that one?
I know the story, but I think all the people in the audience who don't know it really need to hear it.
Oh, okay. Well, August Snow, after 30 years in advertising, I'll shorten it out, was my first book. And footnote, my first book published at the age of 62. So, keep your dreams alive. My lovely agent, Stephanie, she gave me a call one day and she said, Steve, do you have time like next Tuesday between 12 and 2 to talk with this producer? And she said the producer's name. And, I've seen everything this person's ever done and been astonished. So I'm home by myself. Mary Kate is at work, my wife, and, the kids are at school. And I said, yeah, sure. I think I can clear my schedule of, separating the recycling to talk to this person. So that Tuesday comes and I take the call and I'm in the dining room and this producer says, we are gonna do this. I love the book. I love what you did with it. You're fantastic. I'm fantastic. It's gonna be fantastic. It was like, oh, okay, that sounds really good. I still have to pick Mary Kate up from the bus stop, but yeah, sure, that sounds good. So I talked to this producer twice. And then after that, there was just dead silence for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then I found out why. It appears Harvey Weinstein had, other things to think about. So that's essentially my Hollywood story.
Great timing, Steve.
Yeah.
You got out just in time.
You can count on me.
Oh man, well we have a request from the audience for the book club story, the one. And Steve, I was going to ask for it myself if someone else had it, but Tim, just to warn you, so you can be prepared. Have you ever had an up close and personal encounter with a book club that you think you should share with the audience? Because Steve has one. If only Mary Kate were here in the background to give us her opinion on what happened.
Mary Kate, is it okay? I just got approval. It was like maybe 4 or 5 months after the first book was released. And I don't know, it was cold, it was winter. I must have woken up on the wrong side of the bed. I was downstairs in my sweatpants and a dirty shirt, a dirty t-shirt. And I hollered up to my wife, Mary Kate, I'm going to CVS because I need new nose hair clippers because this is out of control. So she's like, yeah, okay, fine. So I go to CVS in sweats and penny loafers, sweats, my t-shirt, coat, get a new pair of nose hair clippers.
What a quaint story this is, a world where we can go to CVS and buy nose hair clippers.
Isn't that something? And trust me, the ones that you buy there don't really work because, if it doesn't have a Briggs & Stratton pull start engine, they're not going to work. So I get home and there's this Volkswagen Beetle out in front of the house. And it's fine. I get out of the car and I start to go in the house and there's a lady standing at the end of my car holding the book, August Snow, saying, it's you. It's really you. And I tried to think of who this person was, like a neighbor, somebody, from one of the kids' schools, whatever. By the time I didn't know her, she's waving up 2 of her friends that are in the Volkswagen, and they come out with their books. And, I invite them inside. I've got my CVS bag with my nose hair clippers in it. And they've just read the book, and I'm signing the book. And it was just amazing. They were taking a tour, the August Snow tour of Detroit. And I won't say too much, but because of the tour, they found out where I live and they saw me going in. Mary Kate comes downstairs with her hair dripping wet with that frozen, what the hell is going on? And that was my real big moment of fame. And I shouldn't ever write descriptions of places I live.
So just to be clear here,
Mhm.
just by reading your book, we could all figure out how to get to your house, is what you're saying.
Well, no, we've since moved. But
Had to move because you wrote your real address into your first book.
who knew? I was entertaining myself, you know? I never thought somebody as brilliant as you would look at it and say, yeah, come on in.
No, that was the, an error in fact checking, because I should have been like, what is this residence on page? Oh.
Can I Google this?
I get the occasional angry email from someone who says, I followed the directions in your book to this restaurant or that place or whatever, and it wasn't there. And I write back, well, that's because it was a fictitious street. If you had been looking on a fictitious street, it would have been right where I told you it was. But people don't always tell the difference. Can't always tell the difference.
Well, and in a way, it's a compliment.
Yeah.
It's what you've done, built that world building. So that's wonderful.
There's a bar in Bangkok where it's probably ending now because they're all so old, but there's a bar in Bangkok called Lucy's Tiger Den, where all the spies on all the sides in Vietnam, from the Soviets to the Chinese they all live in Bangkok now. They're all retired, and they get together in that bar and they retell each other the stories, how they almost killed each other here and there. One of the great bars in the world. And I wrote about it, but I put it in a different street because I knew they wouldn't want all that attention. I must have gotten 30 irate letters about, we tried to find it and it wasn't there. We tried to find it. Well, anyway, there you go. It's fiction, okay? It's fiction. Lucy's was real, though.
Is it still open?
Yes, but
yeah,
it's moved. That's
Yeah.
the truth. It's like everything else, it's been knocked down. Everything else in Bangkok, it's been knocked down. They're destroying the city as fast as they can.
Wow. How long did you live in Bangkok?
I lived there. I never lived there for any. It was never the only place I lived. I went back and forth for probably 14 or 15 years. I didn't start writing about it until the beginning of, I don't know when the first one of these came out, early 15 years ago, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I figured it takes a certain kind of chutzpah to write about a city where you don't actually speak the language very well. It wasn't until the family occurred to me that I thought, I can do this. I can actually write this. But it is a fascinating town. It's fascinating. It's as fascinating as Detroit is, in that there are all these enormous misconceptions and generalizations about it, when in fact it's just a bunch of people doing the best they can day after day after day.
Exactly.
You know, and like Detroit, like any great city, you can stand on any busy corner and get 5 ideas for a novel in an hour and a half. You know, you just see these stories walk by. You know.
Yes. Yes.
Well, gents, the other thing that I really respect about both of you is you're both really excellent readers. And for the fans in the audience who have read all of both of your books, and I know a lot of these names, would you be kind enough to recommend some other books by some other folks that you think might be good quarantine reading?
Stephen?
Well, I'm not even going to say quarantine reading. I'm just going to say good reading. It's a long list, so I'll give you folks playing at home a chance to get pen and paper. Um, okay, all right, we're back. One of the books that I've read recently, it hasn't hit the U.S. yet. It's been released in the U.K. Is Holly Watt's The Deadline, and Holly Watt won the Ian Fleming Silver Dagger. Just pulled it right out of my hands and took it home. And if you read her first book, To the Lions, you'll understand why she won the award. So The Deadline by Holly Watt, and Now She's Gone by Rachel Housel Hall, which should be coming out fairly soon. Emergency Powers by James McCrone. He's a tremendous, tremendous writer. Very exciting. And of course, a young kid, boy, I hope this guy really makes it someday. A guy named James Bin. He's got a book coming out, The Red Horse, and I'm really looking forward to that. I think the kid's got a future.
You know, I'm inclined to agree with you, Steve. And I also want to say a nice plug for Holly here, a great writer, and it's always nice to lose an award to a book you really like, right? But how rarely are Americans ever nominated for the CWA Daggers? That is the British Crime Writers Association. Both of the gents on the line right now, incidentally, have been, but it is very, very exceptional honor. So, you know, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. It was really a pleasure to lose to Holly.
My turn?
Your turn.
I'm not reading a lot of crime fiction these days, and I'm not actually reading a lot of fiction these days. About 10 years ago, I read a book called Morality Play by a British author named Barry Unsworth. And it's 15th century, 14th century. There's a little touring troupe that goes from place to place, putting on morality plays in churches, because the only stages at that point in the world were in churches. Western theater comes out of the church. And they pull into a little town, and something's desperately wrong. Young boys are disappearing. And they gradually figure out that it all has to do with the guy who lives in the castle at the top of the hill. And they begin to incorporate bits of that into the morality plays they're doing, which is essentially, it's the story of the beginning of theater, of fictional theater. It's maybe 150 pages long, and it's astonishing. So I'm currently reading Barry Unsworth again, Song of Kings. This is his version of Troy, and this is fabulous. And nonfiction, I just happen to have it here. This is The Splendid and the Vile, and it is the story of Churchill and the British people during the Blitz, and it's by a master writer named Eric Larson, a history writer. This is just paralyzingly good. So those are my two recommendations right now: Morality Play and The Songs of the Kings.
Those both sound amazing. Well, thank you both for helping with my personal reading list. We're at 6:35 now, so I wanted to open it up for the many audience questions before, so we can, oh my gosh, you guys are popular. Where should I even start? Oh, how about, we'll just go in chronological order. So this is for Tim. Would Junior, oh, sorry, it's not, it's for both of you. Would Junior and August ever meet up? In a fist fight, who would win? So Junior, we haven't really talked about Junior yet, but Junior is the protagonist from Tim's Hollywood Burglar Detective series. I have my answer to this, as the editor, and I want to reserve the right to edit the fist fight sequence when you guys do come up with it.
You know, I think Junior would probably win because of his humor and being able to finesse his way out of the situation. So I prefer to Mr. Bender.
Well, Junior is not long on physical courage. I mean, he's brave enough to go into other people's houses, but the minute there's a hint of danger, he's out of there. So my guess is that you'd have to catch him first, because he would be on wings. He'd have winged feet. He'd be running.
I'd still like to edit that sequence eventually, so the two of you can talk about this offline and get back to me. So Steve, question for you. Had you always wanted to be a book writer? First book at age 62. Was this bubbling for a long time?
The book itself hadn't been bubbling for a long time, but I had always been, always wanted to write for a living. And I took the coward's way out and went into advertising. I don't know. It's something that you can't really quit. It's something in your heart, in your soul, in your mind that you can't really quit. And when your kids are growing up and what have you, you can't tell them stories anymore. You tell yourself stories, and you amuse yourself, and that's where that came from.
Steve, I think you're being a little humble here. I'm going to embarrass you, and I'm going to inform the people that you actually have a published history as a poet and a playwright, which you're not owning up to for some reason.
Well, yeah, that was, playwriting was fun. And I did have my first play here in Detroit, and it moved to off-Broadway. I mean, it was almost New Jersey. It was that far off Broadway.
That far off.
But no, it was at the Judith Anderson Theater, which is still around. And that was wonderful. That was a lot of fun. And poetry, I had a poem published in The Atlantic when I was 17. And well, I got to tell you, if somebody gave me the choice of writing, Steve, you can write a really good 4-stanza poem, or you can do a 400-page book, I would take the book every time. I would. Poetry is hard. Good poetry is hard. So that's a little bit about me.
We do get a little poetry in the August Snow books, though. Your editor can't contain that. It bursts out in...
Yeah, nothing like good poetry.
Amazing sequences, daring do. All right, Tim, I've got a question for you. Can you talk about what comes after Poke?
I've been thinking for the last 5 or 6 months about a book set at Warner Brothers in 1932, when sound had just come in, America was still recovering from the Depression, and musicals were the thing that cheered the nation up. And what cheered them up most of all was Busby Berkeley movies with the giant chorus lines and all the rest of that. And at that point, Hollywood drew beautiful girls, beautiful women from all over America who came thinking what might be waiting for them. And of course, most of them were exploited. It was dreadful in many ways. And we have a young woman who's a chorus girl in the Busby Berkeley movies. And what a lot of people don't know is that, first of all, tap, which is what the Busby Berkeley movies were all about, is a black form. It's entirely a black form. Charles Dickens, when he was visiting America in the 1860s, one of the things he wrote about, the best thing he saw was a guy tap dancing in Georgia, obviously a black man. And white people stole tap, first for Broadway and then for movies, but they had black people on the sets to teach the chorus girls to tap, because they weren't chosen they were chosen for their legs. So I've got a 24-year-old black guy who lives in downtown Los Angeles, who used to be a child star. The only child stars for blacks at that point were the Little Rascals movies and those kids movies, because adult blacks were seen as threatening. So anyway, they are two people who will be joined together in this series. And I know what the first one is. It's sort of a closed room mystery, but I'm having a great amount of fun anticipating it. I haven't written a word, and it may be very different when I do, but anticipating it is enormous fun.
So we actually had another question about whether you were going to cut back to Hollywood for a future novel, and this sounds like, so we're cutting back to Hollywood in the 30s. That's pretty epic.
Well, it was just a vacuum for talent and a vacuum for beauty, and a lot of what happened to those people was not something that wound up on the screen, and for good reason. So there's this huge differentiation between what was on the screen and what was actually happening behind the cameras. So that I find that kind of interesting.
Yeah, I've been spending a lot of my quarantine time listening to my sister's favorite podcast, which is called You Must Remember This. It's
great. That's so great.
Oh, well, anyway, this can't wait to hear more about this one. Hope your editor's getting perspective soon. Sorry, no pressure. Okay. The classic.
Okay.
No, go
ahead. Because of what happened to so many of these women, the title of the first book is The Wrong End of the Rainbow.
Oh.
All those women came out looking for and they were at the wrong end of the rainbow. So that's the first one. And I've got titles for the first three. That's never happened to me before. So this is going to be fun, I think, if I can write it.
It's going to be fun for me, for sure. Okay, wait, this is a question for both of you. The dreaded. Are you a planner or a pantser? And then the follow-up is, what are some of the ways that your writing style has either helped or handicapped you?
Which?
I don't know how to answer. So Tim, take it away.
Okay. I cannot plan a story. I find some people who interest me and I follow them around. And that's the way my books evolve. And then I go back and I cut 9/10 of it and replace it with stuff that's closer to what they might be feeling and thinking. I know people who outline, and I envy them the security that they feel. At some point in every single book I write, I think, okay, this is the one I throw away. I threw away the one that was nominated for the Edgar. I tossed it for 2.5 months. I didn't go back to it. What was the second half of the question?
Well, as your editor, I feel like I need to tell the people honestly that every book you've ever written that you've been working on with me, you have at some point in the middle said that you're going to throw it all away. Like,
yeah, and I have. That's the truth. I've thrown them all away at some point. And then what happens at some point, usually, is that one of the characters, this sounds so schizophrenic, one of the characters speaks up. I'll suddenly find myself realizing that someone is going to do this. And all of a sudden, I can see the next, it's like, writing for me is like, making the first footprints in the snow every single morning. There's nothing to follow. You're just out there.
I love you, my brother. I love you so much.
Well, thank you. It's mutual.
You give me the courage and the will to say, I fly by the seat of my pants. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, it's same here. I'm just following people around. I'm taking dictation. I mean, there are times when I know that I want something to happen.
Yeah.
And it may go from, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 7, chapter 12, because I want to get that sequence that leads them here to those chapters. And if those chapters end up, the chapters prior to it lead fluidly to it, that's fine, but they may lead somewhere else.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm more flying by the seat of my pants. I'm falling backwards off a cliff and hoping I hit soft water, man.
Yeah.
Well, you're both firmly in the category of, and the Soho staffers can back me up here. Someone's like, oh, what's Steve or Tim's new book about? And I'll take out the prospectus that you sent me when we signed the contract, and I'll look at it and I'll put it away and I'll say, I don't know.
This is sort of definitely what
knows. We gotta wait. When they deliver, I'll tell you. I don't know where they're going.
I don't think there's any way to tell the difference between a good book, whether it's been plotted or pantsed. But I think that those methods produce different kinds of bad books. And I think it's possible to tell in the case of a lot of bad books whether the person had it all laid out or whether it came sort of organically. But for a good book is a good book. If you wrote it standing on your head and gargling Listerine, it's still just a good book. That's me.
And I think a large part of that, and I think you've touched on this, Tim, is when you say we're following people around, I'm anticipating one of the questions is, how do you build a character? Well, the same way human beings are built, flesh, blood, experience, soul or lack thereof. I think readers are really smart when it comes to spotting a cutout, using a character as a contributing plot device, and not somebody that has blood coursing through their veins. So,
if I could just, for one more second, I don't know about you, Stephen, but for me, characters remain somewhat opaque to me until I hear them talk.
yes.
And when I realize that I'm not making up their dialogue, I'm not making it up, I'm getting it down, I know I'm okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. That makes me feel better.
I'm not alone.
I've got a question for Steve. Steve, August Snow is such a good cook in the books. Are you, like August Snow, a good cook? And if yes, what is it that you're cooking up when you're stuck at home in quarantine?
I think, I have to be honest because my lovely wife is less than 20 feet away. If she were not 20 feet away, I would say, Emerald Lagasse is a hack compared to me. I think I used to be a better cook, but let's put it this way. I really appreciate good food. And when I say good food, it doesn't have to be expensive food. There are taquerias that only take cash in downtown Detroit that are brilliant. There's Vietnamese food. We've got it all here in Detroit. So I'm a great aficionado of eating. That's it. That's all I got.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, question for Tim. Tim, Pulped was so original. Any future plans for Simeon Grist?
You know, I wrote the first Simeon in a long time, about 2 years ago.
Tell them about what Simeon is. I didn't introduce Simeon.
I'm sorry, Simeon Grist was the first character I ever wrote in a published series. I, at that point, was post-hippie living in a shack in Topanga Canyon, and so was he. And he was a slacker, and he solved crimes because it was what he did, and he could make a little money at it. But I have to say, some of the first person narrative was pretty good, but I had no idea what I was doing. I was astonished that I sold them. I was absolutely astonished they got sold, and I wrote 6 of them, and they even got a couple back. And it happens when you write a series and it gets yanked, it goes out of print, and I thought, okay, what happens to the characters when that happens? And what happens to the characters is that they have believed all along that they're not fictional. And when that last book, in the last copy of the last book gets dropped into a pulping machine to make supermarket ads, there's a kind of, and the character winds up in a limbo that's all privatized, that didn't sell. And there's only one way to get back to the real world. And at some point early in the book, you can see, by the way, when someone down here opens a book of yours, there's a place in your house, in Simeon's house, it's a window, and you're looking up through the book and you can see the person who's reading the book. It's your only contact with the world down there. And this is happening about 25 pages in when a large pair of hands go around the guy's throat and throttle him, and he's dead. And since Simeon doesn't have many readers to begin with, he can't let people murder one, so he has to find a way to get down there. And it's called Pulped, and I laughed myself stupid writing it. So there may or may not be another one. Anyway, it was really fun to write.
I think you should. I mean, it was a really fun book to read, but I'm really excited about this Hollywood in the 30s trilogy, so you should really be focused on that, I think.
Thank you.
Selfishly.
And I shall.
So this is a question for both of you. Oh, and this might be the last one because we're running out of time. But okay, did either of you ever deal with massive self-doubt when first starting out? How do you deal with it? When you're first starting out, it just goes away, right? That's what being a writer is. It's doubt at first and then just total confidence in art.
I think it gets worse. When I dumped Queen of Patpong, which is the one that was nominated for the Edgar, not only did I think that I couldn't write that book, but I was absolutely convinced that I would never be able to write another book as long as I lived. And what happens to me is that at the beginning, I was writing mainly for me. There weren't a bunch of people who read them. And I felt like, at least I got to fail in private. But now I'm sort of failing in public. And there's you, of course. I mean, at some point, I either will or won't hand you a manuscript.
But I'm so nice.
Yes, but anyway, it hasn't gotten any easier for me. In fact, it's probably gotten harder. Stephen?
It's, let's just say that after 2 books and going through the editorial process with the 3rd, I still struggle with self-confidence. It's very tough. It can be consuming, but the only thing that for me overcomes it is the work itself. I mean, you can write, I've said this before, you can write 10 pages and 9 of those pages will be crap and they'll be embarrassing, but something happens on the 10th page that piques your interest and, whoa, did this come out of me? Yeah. And then the next day you do another 10 pages and 8 of them are crap, but hey, you got 2 pages of gold. You just keep going. If you're thinking about being a writer, if you want to be a writer, that's your job. And you go to your job in the morning and you have lunch and you go back to your job, and that's the way it goes.
And there are days when it's like there's an angel sitting on each shoulder giving you dictation, and you're going as fast as you can possibly go, and you're thinking, oh my God, I wouldn't be anywhere else in the world. And 2 days later, some of that looks like crap, but there's always something there, So it's not, I'm not saying, and I'm sure Stephen's not saying that, we're heroes for forging through this, but it is like being both Lewis and Clark at the same time, and Sacagawea made a left when you made a right. I don't know where I'm going, and that's part of the fun.
Yes.
And there is always the fact that there is that point in every manuscript, Tim, you personally, that you tell me you hate it and you're going to throw it out. And then at the end, it's always a really good book. So maybe the self-doubt is a necessary part of the dark canyon of the story that you're getting the reader through.
I think we've all read writers who are maybe too satisfied with themselves. And I think that that's something that many of us can recognize. I mean, there's got to be a little blood on the page. There's got to be, because you're trying to make something up that doesn't exist. Okay, yes. It just doesn't exist. So yeah, I'm okay with it. But it's easy to say that at a remove. When I'm actually feeling it, it's not so okay.
And the big part of it, at least for me, and I think for a lot of folks, is don't think about somebody else out there reading it. You're the first audience. You're the first reader. Yeah. Entertain and inform and move yourself first. That's it. And if you're true to that, then somebody else will read it.
Gents, we ran out of time, but we've ended with these beautiful bon mots of courage and perseverance and creative light in the darkness. And thank you. I don't know if you both planned that, but I just think it's a lovely way to conclude. I'll hand you over to my Soho colleague, Stephen, to close us out. But before I do, I want to say thank you both so much for making my dream come true of getting us all, together. And thank you, everyone in the audience, for listening.
Thank you, Juliet. Thank you, Tim. Really good to see you.
I just feel grateful to everybody, those who tuned in, those who asked questions, those who didn't, and everybody who arranged it. And Stephen, we got to do this face-to-face sometime.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, guys. And thank you, everyone, for coming. And thank you, obviously, Steve and Tim. This was an incredible delight to hang out with you guys for at least digitally. And thank you for starting off this Getaway event series. We'll have more of these. Everyone in here, you guys are signed up for the Getaway newsletter. We'll be recommending a new series every week in your inbox. So look forward to that. And there will be more events like this, and we hope to see you again soon. So thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Soho.
Great. Yeah, thank you, guys. I'm going to end it, but thank you both. And Juliet, thank you. It was so good to see you, all 3 of you.
It really was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. Thank you so much.
Oh, okay. Bye, guys.
Did I hear a baby?
Oh,
I think Carlos is in the other room, huh, Juliet?
No, I mean, I did hear him run by and say "Mama" at one point, but I didn't hear it real quick. Well, caught me on that.
Hi, Juliet.